I hope you're having a great day. Happy Children's Day to everyone out there. Today I want to talk about, we've been seeing hundreds and hundreds of children over the last couple of years. So what I did is I made a list of the things that I see as commonalities in the cases that come to us. And these are some of them are with disease and some of them are just lifestyle disorders. When I say they're lifestyle disorders, it means that poor lifestyle has caused certain conditions. And good lifestyle could be the drug that reverses it and fixes it. So we're going to start off with the number one point today, something which is changing the health of not just children but adults across the world. It is the overconsumption of refined sugar. We all know no matter what anyone tells you, there's a large number of doctors that even tell their patients today to eat sugar. Okay, and we have to understand that this is one of the biggest mistakes that we make, and just because we hear it, because that's music to the ears. When someone professional tells you to eat sugar, there is no evidence that it causes problems to your health. Well, you can believe that, you can have your mind consoled with what you hear, and you can continue eating sugar only to find that you have metabolic disorders, and especially for your children. We have to understand that excessive consumption of sugar comes in between their growth physically, mentally. Every aspect of their life gets affected with the amount of sugar that we see. We've all seen that what's happened in the West over the last couple of years, and the same thing is repeating itself in India right now. And yet that seems to be one of the most difficult things that parents, find to control in their children: overconsumption of sugar. Now, I said overconsumption of sugar. We don't want to bring up our children with no taste of sugar at all, because we all grew up with a little bit of sugar and most of us turned out just fine. The problem is with the overconsumption of sugar. You see, you give them sugar at home, then they have sugar at all the innumerable birthday parties that they celebrate almost every week. And then they have more sugar in hidden processed foods that are sold to us as healthy foods. But if we don't read the labels, like on cereal boxes and granola and all of these power bars that we feed our children because we believe it's healthy, there is so many kinds of different hidden sugar. So the overconsumption of sugar with the lack of activity is what is creating most of the problems in children today. It's easy for us to label and slap a label on our children with ADHD, autism, and all of these issues. Some of them may really have that problem, but most of them are just labeled with it so that it can be treated. They have attention deficit spans, they're hyperactive. You just take away the aerated drinks, you cut down on their sugar, and their problem is solved. We don't have to label our kids with all of these technical terms just because we're feeding them too much of sugar, and because of that, their brains are getting excited and they're getting addicted to it, and then their behaviors change, and all of a sudden an aggressive behavior in a child is seen as a psychological problem today, and it's not common to find children not being treated for this medically, where the root cause of the problem is their lifestyle, their food, their sugar, and all of these things. So as responsible parents, it is our job to discipline them, educate them, and to monitor the amount of sugar. And why we have to do it for them is very simple. As adults, most of us are addicted to sugar. We struggle with the addiction. We struggle to give up sugar. We struggle to lower the intake of sugar that we have. So can you imagine in a child where they don't have that kind of willpower that adults should maybe have? Can you imagine how addicted they get from the moment we start overfeeding them sugar? So that's the first thing that we need to do. So you can have a treat day once a week, you can have a treat day twice a week. Negotiate with your children. Children learn best when you negotiate with them. If you slap on rules to them and you tell them you don't do this and you don't do that and you can't have this at all, guess what? They're just going to do the opposite of that, and that's the biggest problem that we have. But when you negotiate with them, say, okay, fine, this is one day a week, you can have X, Y, and Z. Now what are you going to do in order to earn that treat? And it could be anything. It could be from physical activity, it could be doing errands and chores around the house. It could be anything that can help them with their upbringing and their value system, so they learn to earn. When they keep getting things like sugar and treats easily, then they demand it more and more. And most of the parents who bring children to us have that issue. They don't know how to control their children anymore because we lack vitamin D, discipline. Period. Everything works with discipline. Organizations are built with discipline. The army works with discipline. Everything works with discipline, but the new generation doesn't believe in discipline too much. We think that if we discipline with our children, we don't love them enough. There's a big difference between discipline and love. So a lot of parents are scared to exercise discipline in their children because they think that their children will feel that they don't love them. Well, that's your insecurity, and that needs to change. Discipline is required if you want your child to grow up the healthy way. I should tell you the other part of it. When children grow up to teenagers and they're suffering from diabetes, you know who they turn against finally? They turn against their parents, and they say, how could you not change the amount of sugar that I ate when I was a child? Why did you allow me to eat so much? So you see, life does its cycle and history repeats itself. So we need to understand that with a little bit of discipline, expect the tantrums, expect all of that stuff, but that's part of growing up. No one is going to have parenthood without tantrums, without emotions and all of that stuff. We got to be strong enough to face that, but we got to keep the discipline going, because that's the only way we can cut down the consumption of sugar going into our child's life. The second thing, I can't tell you how many children today come to us depressed, anxiety. I'm talking about 9 years, 10 years, 11, 13, 14, 15, and 16. And one of the biggest issues that we've seen is the amount of time that they're given with gadgets and video games. Now, I'm not completely against this, a little bit of it in a controlled time. Again, discipline is great, but we have to understand that excessive use of video games, gadgets, iPads are making your children more lonely and more depressed. And it's also making them more hyperactive. Because you see, when you have games and gadgets, we all know how a video game works. It's designed to stimulate dopamine production in your mind. The game's got to keep you interested, so you keep playing the game over and over again. You have an iPad, you're constantly with the flick of a finger moving on and on. So the child's mind constantly starts looking for more and more stimulation, dopamine stimulation. And suddenly you take away the video game, you take away the iPad, and they don't know what to do, so they get hyperactive. They need constant stimulation, which they then cannot find in a classroom. They can't find it in normal life. Nature will not stimulate them anymore, because nature is not designed to stimulate your dopamine as fast as technology in the form of video games and gadgets and all of these things. So like I said again, you can have that in their life, but discipline. They need to get a balance of all aspects of life. So just by changing this, we've seen how children get happier, how children eat better. Because if you think your healthy eating habits is going to stimulate dopamine in a child and you're giving them excessive video game time, they're going to find excuses not to eat something like a boring meal, because they need constant stimulation coming from a video game or an iPad. Which is why also meal times, make sure that they don't watch TV, they're not with an iPad, they're not with a phone. They eat their meal and then they have their own separate time. It's as simple as that, because you got to keep the dopamine stimulation separate. And most children who grow up as fussy eaters, they don't want to eat their vegetables and fruits. This is a phase that children go through. Respect the phase. If you start pushing them to do it, they're going to rebel against it. They're going to have adverse feelings against it, and then that's going to be an unhealthy habit. So we have to understand that your child may impress you by eating fruits and vegetables today. 6 months down the line, they may just turn completely against it. It's a phase. Watch it and flow with it. The next thing, parents have this common problem of filling their child's plate up with too much of food. You need to understand that a child's mind works visually. When their little minds see a lot of food on the plate, they automatically get turned off and they start resisting it. Give them a little food that they can see, they can digest, and if they're hungry, they will ask you for more food. Your child's not going to get healthier by overfeeding them and overstuffing them all the time. We have to understand that never overfeed your child. So put a small quantity of food in their plate, let them finish it. If they're hungry, they will ask you for more. Milk, this is a common issue that we get. A common question. We have to understand that the reason that we're against milk today, okay, we're not talking about veganism, we're not talking about animals at all, we're talking about something separate. Most of the samples of milk in India and even across the West are adulterated. They're pumped with hormones, they're pumped with antibiotics, they're pumped with estrogen. And that's the only reason why I don't like milk going into your child. But a lot of people today have access to farms, directly with farmers who are getting milk the right way, without cruelty to animals, without pumping estrogen and antibiotics and all of this nonsense in the milk. So if you have access, I think almost every state in India is now getting connected directly with farmers in small ways. Support your farmers and you will have a regular supply of clean, raw milk. And that milk is a class A protein, which is great for your children. Now, if you're against animal cruelty, all of that stuff, that's your personal choice. But the other side of it, you should know that there are thousands of children who are born lactose intolerant. And they don't have milk at all. And these children grow up to be extremely healthy, with healthy bones and with great health. So it's a myth that without milk, you will have bad health. There are several other sources of good protein, good calcium, and you have a balanced diet, you can get several other sources of good protein and calcium. So if you have great access to milk, and again, here we want to support the Indian cow, because that's what's That's what's conducive to the Indian genes. We can't bring a Jersey cow or a strain from a different country and all of a sudden pump Indians with milk from a different hybrid cow. That's how we have lactose intolerance. That's how we have gut issues, inflammation, allergies towards milk consumption and all of that stuff. But you take a lactose intolerant patient off the Jersey cow milk and you put them on the Indian Gir cow milk, and you find that they don't get inflamed, and most of them can tolerate that kind of milk. So again, it's the right quality of milk, the right way, in the right quantity at the right time. The biggest myth that I want to break today is breakfast. We've all grown, and we are all part of that, because part of our curriculum was to teach people that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Okay? And then we get to know that our nutritional curriculum is also funded by the food lobbies, by cereal companies. And how do you sell a good cereal? How do you sell a good breakfast cereal? By making people believe that breakfast is the most important meal of the day. But yet hundreds and thousands of children and adults wake up every morning not feeling hungry, and yet we're forced to eat a breakfast. Now we have to understand that there will be a whole set of children and adults that require breakfast. They're physically hungry in the morning. That population of people, give them breakfast. For the other population of people and children who do not wake up hungry, do not feed them breakfast. Their body is still in elimination. There are two phases of the human body, elimination and building. In the elimination phase, do not put food in the system, because your body is still eliminating, balancing hormones, repairing, growing, and all of that stuff. In the building phase, you can feed your child and you can feed yourself the food that you require. So we need to break away from that myth of breakfast being the most important meal if it doesn't suit you. Let your children grow up naturally. One of the biggest issues that we see with children coming today to us with health problems, PCOD in young girls, hormonal issues, anger issues in young boys. You see, parents have tried to fill up their day completely. They move out from school, from one extracurricular activity to another. There's tennis, and then there's swimming, and then there's dance, and then there's Spanish. We need to understand at this age, okay, children have to grow naturally. They have to have space to even play and just maybe even do nothing at all. That is part of, we're trying to make them adults at an age where their brain, their motor and sensory skills are not yet completely developed. And then these children, their sleep gets compromised because they come home so late, they eat a later dinner, they sleep on a fuller stomach, and they wake up more tired. So all this peer pressure, all this extra pressure to make children, more successful in life is actually having a negative impact on most of them. Because when children come with parents, I separate most of them and I speak to children alone. And guess what? Most of the children don't even enjoy one or two of the classes that parents are pushing them into every single day. Let your children expose them to different classes, but then let them specialize maybe in just one or two skills. Your child isn't going to become an ace football player and an ace tennis player and an ace gymnast. At some point, they're going to have to figure out a path and specialize in one of them. But we as parents are responsible for putting peer pressure on most of these children today. And guess what? You compromise the sleep of a child. You compromise their growth. You compromise their development. You compromise everything, including their happiness. And today, so many children are just not happy, which is why they turn to sugar, they turn to stimulation of TV and technology and all of that stuff to fill a void that life should be filling, that we should be filling for them. So we need to give them that space to grow. Guess what? Some of the most successful people in the world never even went for extracurricular activities. I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't put them through, but do it in balance. Let them have a balance of growing up as children. Because most adults today say, I miss my childhood. I wish I could get my childhood back. Why? Because you probably didn't live your childhood to the fullest, or maybe it was so good for you that you want more of it today. But we're stealing that away from our children. Most of them don't have a childhood. They have a social calendar of birthday parties. They have a social calendar of events and play dates and extracurricular activities. I'm not against this, but I'm saying do it in balance. It's becoming a little bit too much. Too many birthday parties, too many play dates, and all of these things. Because we don't have that ability to spend time with our own children. This is not for everyone. This is for most people. I'm talking about people who bring their children to us with issues. They don't need diet plans. They don't need medicine. Most of them don't need that. They need this change in their family. They need this change in their upbringing, and everything else changes. The last point, teach your children to grow plants. You may live in a populated city, but there's something called microgreens where you can have this much of space and teach your children how to grow certain vegetables, certain microgreens and stuff like that. Because you see, children and nature are very, very close to each other. Children get involved in growing. They understand where their food comes from. You make them responsible for nurturing a plant, for growing the plant, for taking care of it. Because you see, a lot of things come too easy to children today because it's all done for them. But we need to teach them how to nurture nature, because when you look at our planet and the way it's being destroyed today, it all starts at home. What we can teach them, a once in a year charity organization where they go and plant a sapling isn't enough. You can teach them how to grow your own microgreens at home. When they're involved in the growing process, guess what? They're going to be involved in the eating process as well. And you can get that into their dals, into their salads, and into their juices at the same time. We have to understand that if you have a child out there who's between the age of 2 and 7, that is the time that your child's brain is like a sponge. So you put the wrong stuff into them, that's exactly what's going to get into their subconscious. This is the time that you fill them with values, you fill them with learnings, you fill them with the wisdom of your grandparents or whoever. You tell them stories. You put all of this in them right now, because between 2 and 7, that is the age that they can pick up, they will grasp, and they will remember everything, the good things and the bad things as well. This is a very critical phase for children, and we need to make sacrifices in our own life in terms of time, in terms of everything, to make sure that we can utilize this time frame in their age gap to basically put everything as much as we can into their subconscious. And finally, teach your children, depending on their age, about sex. Do not wait for schools to do it. It is your responsibility, because the kind of world that we're living in today, it is your responsibility to start teaching them about sex. If you don't know how to do it, there are classes for parents. If there are beautiful books that teach children how to be more comfortable with their bodies, to understand good touches, bad touches, to understand what's going around in the world. It is your responsibility, it is not your school's responsibility. So don't wait for that to happen, because you see, a lot of children who come to us have been sexually abused at the age of 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So this is something real, and if it's not happened to us, it doesn't mean it can't. I hope it never does, but it's our responsibility to understand. And the most saddening part is, guess what? This has not happened. This has not happened by strangers. This has happened by family members. The sexual abuse to the child has happened with aunts and uncles and all of that stuff. It's a real thing, and it is our responsibility to teach our children about sex and create a safe environment for them to be able to come and speak to us about everything that they can. If we create fear in our children, if we're not there to listen to them, they will not come to us and they will not share what's happening. Something could happen, but if they come and tell us immediately, there's a lot of things that we can do. So it's our responsibility to create a safe environment for them, an environment of trust, where your child can tell you anything and everything, so that we can help them better to evolve into, great adults. And that's about it. Like you see, I've spoken a little bit about food, because very little of this has to do about food. Everything has to do about lifestyle. If they lead the right lifestyle, they make the right choices about food. They make the right choices about their activity, their sleep, and how we help them grow emotionally. Have a great day, everyone. Happy Children's Day to everyone. As adults, we only really start aging when we lose the child in us. So be playful. Don't be too serious about life. Don't be too rigid in your thought process. Be childish sometimes. Be in a responsible way. Every adult has a child in them. Let that child loose. If someone's controlling that, if someone's not allowing you to be in that space, change your group. But everyone has that childlike ability in them. Use it. And that's when we age gracefully. But when we start getting too serious about life, we're rigid, we're all the time grumpy about life and all of that stuff, that's aging. That's rapid aging. And most people today are aging way, way before their actual biological clock. Have a great day, everyone. Until next time, eat smart, move more, sleep right, and breathe deep.